Hello, and welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I'm Ashley, your host. Today's topic I feel is a powerful one. It'll be about, is homeschooling anti-feminist from a BIPOC perspective? But before we get into today's conversation, I want to give an Ashley's podcast unschooling update. So I decided to use Podcastle for my podcast software and where I record it. I was using different trials, and this is one I felt like was the most user-friendly, so I went ahead and got a subscription for it. It has a bunch of cool features. The Magic Dust one sounds fun. I'll let you know how it goes. It's supposed to be simple. You select the button, it'll balance out your sound, your tone, your voice. And I just played with it. I hadn't actually edited anything really over my voice on it, so I'm hoping it'll be simple and fun. Next, I officially have over 25 followers, and I have over 120 listens, which is big for me at least. And I was on the Facebook, I think I was on the Secular Facebook page, and someone asked, can anybody recommend a good secular podcast? Somebody I didn't know suggested Secular Homeschool Revolution. We got our first public shout out. And it was somebody I didn't know, right? Or I didn't know personally. I say that because my mom and her sisters, anything I post, they're like, "You're so great, you're amazing. I'll share." So I love that they love me so much and they support me. But it's also nice when someone I don't know takes the time and energy to listen to me and say if they agree or disagree with my perspective, and they're willing to share it with a friend or someone who's asking. And we're such a new baby podcast, I didn't know if we were coming up in searches. So I thought I did my due diligence, but it's cool. Someone recommended me, guys. They like our community. All right. So let's get into today. So I found out about this topic on Instagram. This homeschool mom that I follow, Big Mothering, pinned a post on her Substack that I genuinely like her content. And so I was reading through her article asking if homeschooling was anti-feminist. And while I agreed with a lot of her points on her page, I do feel like my voice as a BIPOC person was missing because um, I don't expect her to offer that because I believe she's a white woman, but my reasonings to homeschool and a lot of the people I know in my circle's reasonings to homeschool varied a lot more. And we can all have millions of reasons of why we are homeschooling, but I know as women of color, our reasons of homeschooling were a lot more aligned because it's more of a mechanism of survival for us. So that's what inspired today's episode. But you definitely should go check out her page. She does really good content. It's very thoughtful and intentional, and it's big mothering on Instagram. Okay, so let's get some definitions for what feminism is, what anti-feminism is, so that we have a clear understanding of what the conversation is going to be. So feminism is a belief in the social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. It is a movement that advocates for the rights of women to be equal and to those of men in various aspects of life, including opportunities, treatment, and representation. Feminists work towards dismantling gender based inequalities and stereotypes. Anti feminism is when someone disagrees with or opposes the idea and goals of feminism. People who are anti feminist may not believe in or support the idea that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. It's important to remember that when you're having this discussion with someone about feminism and anti feminism, their life and the lens that they're looking at things from may be the reason why they have such different perspectives, okay? And it would be nice if every time we had somewhat of a complicated situation that everyone was able to look at it from different perspectives or put yourself in someone else's shoes. But that's not the case, and we have these discussions so that we can get curious and learn more. So, why would somebody consider homeschooling anti feminist? I don't think homeschooling is inherently considered anti feminist. I think the perception of homeschooling is being anti feminist because of misunderstandings and stereotypes. And so it people understand associate it or understand it that it limits educational opportunities specifically for girls and reinforces traditional gender roles. However, I don't think these perceptions are universally true. Feminism is about advocating for equal rights and opportunities for all genders. And if homeschooling is done in a thoughtful way that provides an equal educational opportunity, that offers critical thinking and supports individual growth regardless of gender, then it can align with feminist principles. But the key is to make sure your homeschooling environment is inclusive and it's free from gender stereotypes and it empowers your kids regardless of their gender identity. I think I talked about it in my first episode when I was looking at co-ops as I was a baby we were a baby homeschooling family, and I went and visited this I didn't know at the time how conservative it was, but a conservative co-op. And it looked they were offering some really cool classes, and I think it was really affordable. So I was like, oh well, we're not Christian, but I do think it's something I would like my kids to have access to. And I see the boys were taking a science class, and I saw that the girls were taking like a home ec class. And I said, oh, and the the classes were split by gender. And so I thought, well, I'm going to ask. And I was like, so did the girls already take science? Are they going to rotate it out in the next like 6 weeks or the next semester? And you're like, oh no, we don't offer the girls science in like the co-op space. Like I don't know if these girls were offered science at home, but in this co-op space in our educational opportunity, the girls were not offered science. They were taking like a home ec class. And while I do think life skills are important, I think not being offered science is a huge doing those girls a huge disservice. Um, and so I don't have any deeper words than I do understand why some people's perception is homeschooling's anti-feminist. But when we have secular spaces and secular communities that are creating a new narrative for homeschooling, um, that's why it's important for us to be loud and share our own experiences so that we can change the perception a little bit. But we also need to acknowledge that that is some people's reality, and it's hard to fight that when you live in a state like Texas where there's not really any guidelines or checkpoints or check-ins. And I know that's such a hot topic discussion, especially here in Texas in the homeschooling groups, where I'm in San Antonio, so it's a big military town, and so people are coming from California where they're used to getting, I guess, vouchers or stipends. I'm not from there. I'm not well versed, but they're used to having like a charter or an umbrella school where they can get funds to help provide for their homeschooling journey. And here in Texas, you don't get anything, no tax write-offs, no stipends, no discounts, no nothing. And so they're like, oh man, that's so unfortunate when they find out how Texas is. But these Texas natives are like, we don't want government in our education. And I can see it, right? Because they don't want anybody telling them who, what, when, where, why. But whenever we're not offering um, girls, or I mean kids, an inclusive learning environment, I think it is harmful, and it does make you wonder about having those check-ins or checkpoints. A page you could follow on Instagram is Responsible Homeschooling. They're sponsored by the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, and they fight for homeschool children's rights to a quality education in a safe home. A lot of their information is coming from previously homeschooled kids and their experiences. And an interesting read that's on their page on the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, they released an article sharing that girls who are homeschooled have less access, not all, but there's a percentage of them that have less access to science. And it's predominantly happening in states that have relaxed homeschool laws. So, for instance, Texas is considered a relaxed state with homeschool laws. I mean, we have some guidelines, but we don't really have a lot of oversight. And so, a lot of the comments are from girls who were previously homeschooled who didn't have any access to science. And so it's important to know that those narratives are out there, those stories are somebody's truth, and we can take that into heart. All right, so we're going to get into this part of the conversation where we're going to explore why homeschooling from a Black, Indigenous, and person of color standpoint isn't as simple as labeling it anti-feminist, but rather an act of survival and empowerment. And I hope that you're listening to this part of the conversation with an open mind and an open heart, and are here to learn from a different perspective. Okay, so I do understand there are many reasons on why a family can't or doesn't choose to homeschool. There are a select few of people who choose not to homeschool because it's against feminist values, because of the perception they have of homeschooling in the traditional gender roles. I mean, most of the time it is the mother who is homeschooling, not always. And I know, fortunately, in my circle, there are a lot of dads who support, who teach classes, who take over a subject. And so that's nice because I know that's not the norm across the board. But when we're looking at if someone's not homeschooling because it's against feminist values, I would like them to instead look at it like it's a smart move in response to a system that has always been unfair to BIPOC kids, BIPOC families. And so we're going to first really discuss the survival over anti-feminism. The need for a lot of BIPOC families to homeschool is deeply rooted in a need for survival rather than a rejection of feminist principles, because this choice it is shaped by acknowledgement of the inadequacies within the mainstream educational system, particularly in its failure to address the specific needs and experiences of BIPOC communities. Historically and currently, the educational landscape falls short in providing an inclusive and culturally responsive environment for BIPOC students. The traditional curriculum frequently neglects diverse histories, perpetuates stereotypes, and marginalizes the contributions of BIPOC individuals. This exclusionary approach not only hinders a comprehensive understanding of the world, but it also fosters a sense of alienation for BIPOC kids when they're in this educational system. So in response to these challenges, these ongoing challenges, homeschooling emerges as a survival strategy. It becomes a means for BIPOC families to take control of their kids' education, ensuring that it is tailored to address the unique cultural, historical, and social contexts that define their lives. And when you're homeschooling, families can engage with their heritage, impart a well-rounded understanding of their identity, and counteract the erasure of BIPOC narratives often perpetuated by mainstream educational materials. I think that's it is interesting because, like, if you you invest all these years into the local school and you're constantly hearing one narrative, right? And you don't hear much about yourself. I think that is hard to feel good about who you are and where you come from, because doesn't it's not important enough to talk about or celebrate. And if it is celebrated or talked about, it's in a very negative way, and we're only going to talk about the people who fought for these people to have a more positive experience. I think there should be more conversations around celebrating more diverse narratives. And so this is an act of survival to celebrate this child so they know that they are someone, they are worthy, and who they are matters. All right, so now we're going to discuss navigating banned books and marginalized histories. So when we're homeschooling, that empowers us to personalize our kids' educational path that aligns with their specific needs and narratives and their cultural relevancy, right? So when we're in the realm of homeschooling, we get to regain the autonomy to mold an educational journey that incorporates but also honors our historical background and recognizing the varied tapestry of our experiences. And we are fearlessly addressing the prevalent erasure that is deeply embedded in conventional curricula. And we get to personalize the approach to our kids' education. And when we're doing this, this is making a statement as a deliberate act of resistance against the historical tendency to marginalize and overlook the contributions of BIPOC communities in mainstream educational materials. So we also get to address the gaps in representation, ensure that our kids are immersed in a curriculum that resonates with their cultural identity and celebrates, again, who they are. And it is interesting how much people have pushed recently for banned books and censorship. And it makes you wonder, why are they working so hard to keep a certain narrative out of schools? I mean, we know why. We know that we want one side of the story to be told, and it is closely, I don't know if it's the conspiracy theorist of myself, but I'm like, this is not Gilead. We're not inching towards Gilead. So I think it's powerful what we're doing when we're BIPOC and reclaiming our kids' education. The last point I want to address is the critical issue of safeguarding our BIPOC kids from a systemic racism within the public schools. Edweek.org released some pretty scary data that Black boys are 3 times more likely to be arrested than their white counterparts for committing similar offenses. Arrested. That has such long-term impacts that these boys are 3 times more likely to be arrested. And then, if we want to dig some more, Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls is a book written by Monique Morris, and it further explores how Black girls face dehumanization in the current school system. She talks about how Black girls are unfairly judged based on their appearance, their clothing, their language, their behavior, and they are put up against racism and patriarchy and being devalued by other people's perceptions, mainly from teachers and administrators in their school. And when they're put up against these prejudices, prejudices, excuse me, those have really damaging consequences. I don't, we know the system needs to change. The system is currently broken, and we hear that, but I don't, I don't know a faster way to save our BIPOC kids from the system. And I know homeschooling is not always possible for everyone. It definitely is a sacrifice. But every student in our educational system in public school should be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. And also, before I forget, Push Out has a documentary. If you're not a big reader or listening to it or don't want to listen to it by audiobook, there is a documentary based on the book. I think you can get it on YouTube if you pay for it. You also can try the Canopy app. Starts with a K, Kanopy. It is on the Canopy app. I access the Canopy app with my library card, and I get access to it for free. So I encourage you to reach out to your local library to see if the Canopy is a resource you can have access to. I don't know if there's a subscription, you can pay for it, but this is the one place that I've seen that has so many documentaries. But back to the Push Out, that was not something I was able to watch in one sitting. It brought out so many strong feelings. I was angry, I was mad, I was sad. So, I wanted to finish it. And I know even though I read the book, to see names and faces and stories, I cried. And I think it made me more committed to my journey to sacrifice, to homeschool, so that I can safeguard my kids so that they're sure that they know that we're breaking down stereotypes and fostering a positive environment so that they can thrive. And it's unfortunate that not all kids have access to that. But yeah, I definitely encourage you to look at the edweek.org data, to check out the book and to check out the documentary. And there's lots and lots of resources that you can Google. But those were the ones I wanted to make sure that I shared on this episode. So, in wrapping up this episode, the move towards prioritizing homeschooling among BIPOC families isn't about chunking the dues to feminist principles. It's more like we are rolling our eyes at the current educational system and its inability to get its act together. It's a response, not a rejection. We're saying, hey, the system is dropping the ball on understanding and meeting the needs of BIPOC communities, and we're tired of it. And we've seen that in the education system, the biases don't stop at the school gates. They have a long-term effect that messes with the well-being and growth of BIPOC kids. It's like the system it's not like they are putting hurdles in front of them based on how they look or talk. And that's not okay. These kids don't deserve the trauma they're receiving in the current educational system. So the key here is not to just acknowledge that these issues are happening, but getting our hands dirty and fixing them. It's time to actively get to work and work towards creating an environment where every kid, regardless of color or background, gets a fair shot at a solid education. So we're going to swap the injustices for opportunities and build a home educational environment that is inclusive and respectful of who they are. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I did say it was going to get a little heavy. I do have some big feelings right now. I'm going to have to go drink some tea, some chamomile tea to calm myself. But it's important that we have these conversations and we keep having these conversations, because the current school system is evolving with the school choice conversation, with micro schools and homeschooling being on the forefront. And so when we're having these conversations, we're giving people access to information and to data that they didn't have before. And we're not scared anymore. We know we have options and we know we can take advantage. And so this is what we're doing here at the Secular Homeschool Revolution. We're building community. And I am thankful for those of you who are being a part of the conversation and who are going to continue the conversation. So thank you. Well, thank you once again for joining us on the Secular Homeschool Revolution. And I'm going to try to have my next episode up by Friday. So fingers crossed, because the way I planned my week out for Sunday, I made time to have it done by Friday. But I'm going to hold myself accountable. But thank you again. Have a great night or a great day, depending on the time you're listening to